Because of sugar if it's.
Yeah, the kombucha feeds off sugar.
Frozen can't drink.
Yeah, I mean like most of these probiotics, they feed on starches and sugar. And so kombucha is specific to sugar, and it likes caffeine a lot too, that helps it grow. So most kombuchas do have caffeine and sugar. It can grow fine on sugar without caffeine. The other one that's common now is the Wiley's sodas. So that's Jun. So Jun is similar to kombucha. All of these are kind of like bacterial, yeast, fungal growths of sorts that ferment different things. And Jun feeds off honey. And so honey, for most people, is a better source of sweetener than sugar is. And so the Jun can be a little gentler on the system than the kombucha because kombucha grows off sugar as opposed to off honey. There's usually very little left in there because most of the beneficial bacteria have broken it down, but when you taste it, it does have a sweet taste, so there's probably still some.
What?
Jun?
What is that? J-U-M?
Yeah, J-U-M.
And
Yeah.
where, is that at the co-op or what?
No, it's similar to kombucha. It's a big disc, looks like placenta or something. And it's like yeast. Yeah, it's a mother. Yeah, it's like a big thing of mucus. And I don't think you can buy it at the co-op. But you can get Wiley soda at the co-op, which is made with gin. Yeah.
Wiley soda?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, he does like a turmeric one and a ginger one and a birch one. And we saw a new one he was doing that was like hibiscus.
Tulsi.
Yeah, Tulsi ones. And he does a bunch of different things.
I was going to ask you, is tincture anything like this stuff that we're talking about?
No. Tinctures are just alcohol extracts of specific herbs.
And what is that for?
It depends. Basically, the alcohol, when you extract certain herbal constituents, it makes it a little bit more bioavailable, and it goes into the system more quickly than taking powders or tablets or other things. So, for some people, it can make it more bioavailable and act more quickly. And alcohol is fermented, so there is some similarities. But
the only reason I'm asking is I ended up making some blackcurrant and then cilantro. It's in my refrigerator, but I don't know what to do with it. So it's kind of like for medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, tinctures are usually
just for medicine. Okay.
So aren't there some tinctures that will kill the bacteria?
Well, alcohol kills bacteria. Yeah. Pretty much all alcohol.
But if it's just like a drop in the thing,
Yeah,
time, it's
exactly.
not
Yeah.
like a big.
But if you take a dropper full every day,
Still extremely small dose. And like I said, you have 10 to 1. And you have so many probiotics. And the other side of this, I talked a little bit about onions and inulin, but it's pretty much all of your superfoods, the phytonutrients, the plant nutrients in all of the superfoods are like the perfect complement to probiotics. So like black elderberries and blueberries and acai and all of the kind of like super, even chocolate to some extent, although you have to be careful with chocolate because a lot of times they put emulsifiers in the chocolate, and emulsifiers are actually like soy lecithin, or any sort of lecithin. You see that in a lot of chocolate products. That kills beneficial bacteria. It's like kryptonite for probiotics. So you have to be careful with that. But all of those superfoods create the prime environment for the probiotics to grow. And that's true of fruits and vegetables in general. And so that's one of the things that the paleo diet is really popular right now. And I've had a lot of clients who benefited from kind of a meat and vegetable centric diet. But it's really the vegetables that are of benefit because meats don't provide any benefit to the probiotics. And it's actually the probiotics that do most of the digestion and breaking down of the meats and making all of the different vitamins and minerals and proteins in the meats more digestible for the system. It's really the fruits and the vegetables. And so that's like the garden that creates the benefit. And so one of the analogies I use in the handout is I talk about this concept called the bioterrain. And so the microbiota create your bioterrain. Basically what that means is if you think of your internal digestive system like a forest, and your forest has fruits, let's say there's an apple tree in your forest, and that apple tree falls onto the ground, then if it's a healthy, thriving ecosystem, then an animal will eat that apple, or the soil microorganisms will break down that apple really quickly and easily. If, on the other hand, your internal terrain is more like a city, and that apple drops on the sidewalk, there's no animals to eat it, there's nothing in the soil to break it down, and so it rots. It ferments and it rots, and it causes bloating and gas and discomfort in the system. And so that's kind of this whole concept of the bioterrain, and that's really what we're working on, is improving the number of beneficial bacteria in the bioterrain, so that those improvements then mean that over time we have created this really healthy ecology, and when we eat something toxic or we're exposed to environmental toxins, everything's in place to be able to break that down swiftly and easily instead of letting it sit there on the sidewalk and rot.
Do you personally have a certain ratio of fermented veggies to fresh veggies that you eat, and you?
Yeah, I mean, fermented foods in general are just considered condiments. So I eat them with every meal, but I don't eat very much of them. You know, so I'll have a little of yogurt or kefir with breakfast usually. I'll pretty much have some fermented vegetable with lunch and dinner. I haven't been super in. I used to do a lot more gin, but I don't do very much gin or kombucha anymore. I've been experimenting with ginger bug, which is a fermentation that happens from fermenting ginger. So I'm always experimenting and finding new ways to kind of play with all these different concepts.
Make kimchi?
Well, kimchi's a little bit too spicy for me, so I make lots of vegetable ferments, but I don't tend to put tons of chilies in my vegetable ferments and tons of garlic, which is what kimchi is all about. I do a fair amount of miso, but like I said, shipping the South River miso from, I think it's North Carolina or something, it's really expensive because I don't do a lot of soy and I don't do a lot of gluten, and so that, you know, I probably would do more miso for the shipping costs, but it's so high.
What a cost was.
I call the co-op.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys are good anyway.
You said they made three kinds, zuki, millet, and what was the other?
Well, they make a lot of different kinds. They make a ton, but the ones that are all gluten and soy-free are zuki, millet, and chickpea. But they make all your standard.
What kind you want? What kind you best?
Oh, my favorite is the chickpea because it's a little bit mellower. The zuki is kind of sweet, and the millet is kind of bland, and so I like the chickpea the best, but they're all good.
There's a rice miso too. I bought that before.
Straight rice, no soy.
Well, right now in my house, I have a chickpea, and that's my favorite. But I bought a rice, and I think it was a white miso. I don't know if it's straight.
I'm glad you brought this up. So in order for miso to have the beneficial probiotics, it has to be fermented for 6 months. White miso is only fermented for 3 months. So the white miso doesn't tend to have, it probably has some probiotics, but because of the short fermentation time, it doesn't tend to have proliferation of the beneficial bacteria that are really used for, miso is primarily used for improved protein absorption and for its anti-carcinogenic and anti-cancer effects. But the white miso doesn't have those effects because it's not fermentable.
Is that why the people in Japan after the bomb got through the eat miso every day?
Yeah, that's why it happened in Japan, because they were ready for it. Yeah, I'm sure that benefited them significantly. Yeah, miso is amazing anti-cancer.
And do probiotics make it through the stomach acid?
Well, that's what you're looking for. So some strains of probiotics do, and there's more than just those strains. But those are the most common ones, and those are the ones where I was able to find the most research for that were listed there. So every single one of those does make it through the stomach without a problem. And they do colonize, and they do adhere to the intestinal lining. And so a lot of probiotic manufacturers will extrapolate, right? Saying like, oh, this does that, so this one all, this is Lactobacillus acidophilus, LA5, and we know this doesn't, but we're selling you Lactobacillus acidophilus, whatever, and that one probably does too. And so that's the biggest myth that is really important to not get caught up in that myth.
So all of them go through, right? Well, some packages of probiotics say that they are enteric coated and will pass through the stomach acid, but I've only seen that on one brand.
Yeah, and that may be true, but you want to cross-reference and make sure it's one of the strains listed here, because it may make it through, but that doesn't mean that it adheres to the intestinal lining and then it colonizes. And so in order for to be useful, you want those three things. So it's kind of going back to that dog analogy. If you need a dog to herd cattle, you pick the right dog to do the job. You don't just pick a Chihuahua because it's a dog. That's the same idea as like picking Lactobacillus acid.
So are you saying on that chart?
Yeah, on that chart.
Shows which ones to buy, right?
Yeah, it shows which strains are the most beneficial.
And you should you buy a strain that needs to be refrigerated? Because sometimes you can buy a probiotic that doesn't have to refrigerate it.
Yeah, so each of the strains have very unique characteristics in terms of what they need in order to thrive, just like each dog has very unique characteristics in terms of what size, shape, and color they are.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain strains that do not require refrigeration. But most of the research has found that the strains that are most beneficial, there's a reason that they proliferate well in yogurt and milk kefir, because when they are in dairy and they are kept cold, they do tend to work better in the system. So some of them don't need that specifically, but there definitely is a cooperation that happens between the dairy and especially between the yogurt and the different probiotics.
I have two questions. One of them was the amount of, you said 1 to 2 tablespoons 3 times a day for 30 days, and then another, or just recently you said something about 3 to 6.
Oh, I was just extrapolating. So if you did 1 tablespoon for 3, yeah.
That's per day.
Yeah, that's per day.
Okay.
So 3 is the minimum per day, basically.
Yeah.
You don't want to do less than that. So you're trying to rehabilitate.
Okay, and the other one was, when I was a little girl, I had ear infections all the time because I was fed a lot of dairy. And my mother, being a good nurse, had me on tetracycline all the time. And I just, can that damage the ability to have the bacteria in your bowels later on in your life, or through? Because my digestion has always been weak. I've been a vegetarian since I was 27.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say weak, I just mean it didn't, it wouldn't digest a lot of meats and things like that.
Yeah.
But the thought just occurred to me, of like, have I been going on all the way through my life without enough bacteria in there because of that?
Well, to me, that's the beauty of bacteria, is that there's no way so you can permanently damage the host.
You can?
Yeah, you can get leaky gut syndrome, you can get intestinal inflammation, you can damage the environment, like the bioterrain in which they grow. But
Irreversibly? Is that what you meant by permanent? Is irreversible damage?
yeah, you can definitely irreversibly damage your intestinal
But
lining.
it can improve itself.
Yeah, oh, totally.
Yeah.
But in terms of the bacteria, no, because they're union. Yeah, they're renewable. They're a renewable resource. They're like the best renewable resource that we have. And so even though the environment that you have in there may not be optimal, by using the probiotics and allowing them to proliferate and getting a good diversity of different probiotics, even though that environment may not be perfect, it's still going to be able to carry those probiotics. And most likely, those probiotics are gonna adapt to that environment because that's what they do, right? So if they find that, oh, things aren't quite perfect in here, then they're gonna adapt to that and actually like work within the environment that you've been giving them, because that's what they do. Whereas like the human genome, that's kind of what I was saying, you can permanently damage things because we just don't change and adapt as quickly as bacteria do.
What do you think of bees for your blood type?
I think that it has merit, and my biggest qualm with the blood type diet and the paleo diet and those type of things is I feel like there is not a one size fits all solution, and I feel that we're dynamic over our life cycle. And so the blood type diet may provide extreme benefits for people for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but that doesn't mean that that is the perfect diet for them for the rest of their life. How I ate when I was 13 is very different than how I eat now, and how I eat when I'm 60 is going to be very different. And so to peg me with the blood type diet and say that's how I should eat for the whole trajectory of my life seems a little insincere. So I've seen it provide benefit for people, I've seen the paleo diet provide benefit for people, but I don't necessarily believe that then they should adhere to that for the next.
It's probably like just being diversity, it's just diversity.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, and I mean my biggest thing is eat more vegetables. You know, if you do one thing like eat your vegetables. Eat like 4 to 6 servings of vegetables a day. You know, every serving is different, but they're all about a half cup. And like that one thing right there, I think that's why the paleo is so useful for a lot of people, because they stop eating grains, which means they start eating a lot more vegetables, and they think it's all about the meat, but it's really all about the vegetables.
Yeah.
Well, then one is I'm doing this what you're saying, you know, pretty much paleo, and my system is kind of like, okay, now we're going to more raw veggies. One reason because I'm not eating enzymes right now, a supplement that would help a lot of people with digestive tract. But also I use like the NutriBullet and other blenders and things. If we can mechanically break down the vegetables, whether they're in their raw state or cooked, will that actually help our bodies to digest and utilize more nutrients?
Yeah, so all of those cooking and using blenders is basically like pre-digesting your food. So again, it comes down to the unique strength of your digestive system, and some of us need our foods pre-digested because we don't have the enzymatic capacity to break down the foods. So if you're one of those people, then cooking your food or blending your food or somehow processing your food in a way where your body has to do less will actually allow you to get more out of the food. So the other side of that is anytime you cook it or anytime you blend it, you do break down some of the cell walls and you do lose some of the different vitamins and minerals and other beneficial things that are in that food. But if you weren't going to digest those anyway, then you weren't going to get them anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. So it really depends on your unique digestive capacity. Most people that I see don't have a really, really strong digestion. And the way that I tell is I look at their tongue. And so if your tongue is a nice pink color with just kind of the slightest gray coating on the top, no cracks, no scallops on the side, then it's likely that you don't need to cook your food, you don't need to blend your food. If your tongue is any other variation of that, then cooking or blending can be really useful to help pre-digest your food.
And what about enzyme supplements?
I'm not a big fan of enzyme supplements long term. I think they can be useful in short bursts, but the problem with enzyme supplements is that if your body's, if you're taking them, your body stops doing it. So your body is very adaptable in that way. Like if you're taking the enzymes, they're like, oh, we've got plenty of enzymes, we don't need to produce more of those. And so those endocrine glands that produce those enzymes tend to atrophy and stop doing their job. So I think to get the enzymes in the system and help improve digestion of your food, they can be really useful, but long term, then it actually stops your body from doing what it is meant to do.
How long is long term?
I'd say over 6 months, yeah.
6 months. Alrighty, and then is there a food temperature that kills enzymes in natural food, like 100 and something?
Oh, yeah,
Foods
no.
are raw, they have more enzymes from one.
Well, what do those enzymes do?
They break down the food
So why would food have enzymes in it that breaks it down?
for digestion so the body. can-
Why does the food want you to be able to digest it more easily? Why is the food producing enzymes so that you can digest it more easily?
So that we can benefit with the vitamins and
So
minerals.
that's a very anthropocentric view of the world, that all the food that's out there produces enzymes so that we can digest it, and I just don't buy it. I just don't think that, like, a carrot is really that concerned about me digesting it well, that it's gonna produce enzymes so that I can digest it more efficiently. So I think the whole thing about raw foods having more enzymes, it's kind of a made up, it just doesn't rationally make a whole lot of sense that foods would produce enzymes that would help us digest them, because they don't really want us to eat them. So I think there are a lot of things. I think there are a lot of things in food that are broken down, but I don't think enzymes is one of them. So there are vitamins and minerals that cooking and processing food are going to get broken down, but I don't think a lot of foods that we eat have specific enzymes in them that we need to digest those foods. I think
What are they for then, not digestion?
they're for the plant itself to digest the things that they digest, like light and soil and water. They're things that are useful to the plant. That doesn't, everything that's in the plant doesn't mean that it's actually useful for us. So if there are enzymes in there, I don't think they actually provide benefit for us.
Do you think that we need enzymes in order to digest food, or are you thinking that we don't, that enzymes don't help us at all?
No,
to digest?
we do need enzymes, but it's the enzymes that we produce ourselves.
And what about older people here that produce less enzymes, produce less enzymes? So we're gonna have a harder time possibly
Yeah, it's possible.
digest, so maybe we should take enzymes in order to.
You will, if you take the enzymes, you will digest your food better, but you'll also become dependent on taking the enzymes. And the probiotics digest a lot of your food. So another study that they've done is to show the energy that's released from food. So people in the US, on average, the food that we eat, because of the state of our probiotics or the state of our microbiota, we get about 10% of the energy inherent in that food. Where in traditional cultures, where they have much more diversity in their microbiota, they get 20 to 30% of the energy inherent in that food. So you can see that it's not only the enzymes are important, but also a lot of the enzymatic activity that takes place actually takes place because of the microbiota, and not because of the hydrochloric acid and the amylase and the other things that we're digesting specifically.
Microbiome, like sun, water.
Microbiota is
quality of
the
this.
probiotics, basically. It's the beneficial bacteria.
So fermented foods produce more probiotics.
Yes.
And I thought fermented foods also increased enzymes, or were higher in enzymes than, say, the regular vegetables.
No, it's the probiotics in the fermented foods that allow you to break down and utilize more of those things in the system. Yeah. Well, it's 9 o'clock, so I'm going to end because some people are tired and need to go home. If you have questions and want to come up and talk, let me know.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks for all the good questions. That's great.
Thank you, this is great.
Yes.
Anyway, it is from here in the air and everything. So we're starting out with some lots of millions.
Yeah.
And you're reading innovation for about 98 cents. That's how you chose this. And
Yeah, so basically what I was saying is, because it's a class format,
But if somebody like that, I have taken
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
and there are such things as the goals.
Definitely. Yeah, one of the things that, so it's all about strain specificity. So certain strains of probiotics provide no benefit to
Yeah, I got that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, okay, I can quit taking the ones that I have, I don't believe there's too many of them. Where I can apply. This is something else. Less.
Yeah.
And you keep it in your
No, it doesn't have anything to do with this. It has something to do with the base always growing. So like, I said,
So you don't want the GMOs.
and I have tomorrow so I'm not super strict. Yeah, in the research on endocrine disruption in terms of soy, you can make a point case for either side.
And the sweater, that'll keep you warm.
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, yeah. Okay.